Good morning and welcome to Breaking Points. Emily, how you doing?
Doing great. As a reminder, everyone, get a premium subscription.
Yes,
right?
That's what makes this show work.
That's right.
There's going to be a lot of fascinating stuff on today's program, and some of it will make you furious at some other elements of the media, and hopefully will make you grateful for outlets like Breaking Points, like DropSite. And as that gratitude washes over you, remember that you can go to breakingpoints.com and become a premium subscriber to help this thing go along so that we don't have to moonlight as speechwriters for powerful political figures, because you don't want us to have to do that.
That's a little teaser of what's to come.
Yes.
Ryan has some really great original reporting to share later in the show. And
a couple things that we don't have time to get to.
Yes.
If you missed the Katie Porter interview,
it's going viral.
Go find it. Incredible. She's like, let me see if I can torpedo my campaign in one interview.
Yes.
It's really incredible.
Mission accomplished.
The background on her, the knock on her in the House was always that she was cruel to staff and also to some other members. Her defenders said, no, that's sexist. She's just tough.
Oh my God.
You go ahead and watch this clip. You tell me who was right about that. We also, maybe we'll get to cover the Virginia election at some point, but there's this wild AG scandal going on.
It's a disaster.
And a guy apparently was quoting Michael Scott from The Office, but took 4 days to say that and got painted as somebody sending out death threats or something.
I don't know.
The whole thing is incredible. Might cost Democrats everything in Virginia. We'll see. As it was mentioned on the show yesterday, Alex Colson, our DropSite journalist colleague, and more than 100 others were released from Israeli prison. But overnight, 9 more ships were illegally seized by Israel in international waters, including the Conscience and like 8 other ships, more than 150 doctors, journalists, nurses on their way to deliver. Said they had about $115,000 worth of aid to deliver. So that's now in the hands of the Israelis.
And Pam Bondi was testifying in the Senate yesterday, so a lot of highlights from her very contentious testimony, and it really ran the gamut, as you would expect it to, from a lot of questions about Epstein, but also some questions about that Qatari jet, some questions about the National Guard, the uses of the National Guard, and much more. So stay tuned for the highlights and lowlights of Pam Bondi's testimony. Andrew Cuomo making the rounds, talking to Stephanie Ruhle, talking to The View. It's really something. And we'll talk a bit about Zohran Mamdani's controversial, I guess we can say,
People mad.
10-7 post. We'll break down the controversy, the non-controversy, whatever you want to call it, and get to that. There's also, we're going to be talking to one of the journalists who broke a story wide open about the Argentinian bailout that we covered last week in the soybean context, is what we talked about last week. But actually, how did that money from the United States end up going to Argentina? Why is probably the better way to put it. Why did that money end up going? There are many explanations, but I think he landed on a pretty good one, Ryan.
Yep. Eugenia Muzio will be joining us from Argentina, who's done a lot of the reporting that exposed which particular hedge fund executives were lobbying our hedge fund executive, who now serves as Secretary of Treasury, to give Milei a whole bunch of money to bail them out and screw our farmers along the way.
It's good for everyone.
Yeah.
Win, win, win,
and
win.
some L's here at home, but that's okay.
Yeah, whatever. Don't worry about it. Okay, so should we get to the shutdown?
Yeah, and then we'll talk about some David Frum and Douglas Murray stuff at the very end.
That's right, because this is the tease. Let's bring this intro full circle. Ryan teased support breakingpoints.com. Premium memberships. If you can't like and subscribe, it helps us so much, and leave comments. That helps us so much. But Ryan has a piece of original reporting that I was going to say dropped at DropSite last night, but I felt really bad saying that. But it's something else. Yeah,
and then we'll also have Israel also got caught with running basically a bot campaign trying to prop up a new Shah in Iran. We'll talk to Negra Motazavi about that later in the program. It's just like, how do you even keep your head around any of this stuff?
I don't know, but I'm glad that at least it's just bots at this point.
Yeah, it's just bots all the way down.
All right, let's get to the shutdown. So yesterday, Donald Trump took questions in the Oval Office. We're going to bring you some of those comments, basically centered around federal workers, and roll a clip of Jon Stewart for his insight into how Democrats should be handling this. But before we do, that's what Trump is going to be talking about. It's what the conversation was about on Capitol Hill. It's this question of back pay for furloughed workers. The Trump administration is actually insisting that it can just get rid of a lot of workers and then not pay a lot of workers as a way to sort of up the ante for Democrats. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and roll this clip of Jon Stewart talking about how Democrats should be handling the shutdown fight.
75 million Americans voted for a Democrat in this last round of presidential elections. And at this moment, they have zero power at the federal level, not in the House, not in the Senate, not in the executive, and not in the courts. There has not been a moment of conciliation or concern about the issues and policies that drove those 75 million votes. Not a moment. At present, the Democrats' largest victory over these past 8 months is getting a guy who may or may not be a criminal back from El Salvador so Trump could send him to Uganda. That was the big win. And then suddenly, a small ask for people's preservation of health care is a Molotov cocktail. Look, I've given Democrats an enormous amount of shit for their poor leadership. Lack of specific and actionable plans, terrible messaging, abysmal wordplay. Did I mention poor leadership? But standing up for 75 million Americans in this moment to defend the rights of people to go into a little less medical debt seems like the least they can f***ing do.
So Donald Trump and Russ Vought over at the Office of Management and Budget are trying to change the calculus for Democrats away from even what Jon Stewart is saying there and complicate the shutdown conversation. Let's go ahead and roll this clip of Donald Trump in the Oval Office getting questions about whether federal workers should be entitled to back pay. There was a memo from Russ Vought that suggested otherwise. Here's Donald Trump.
Is it the White House's position that furloughed workers should be paid for their back pay?
I would say it depends on who we're talking about. I can tell you this, the Democrats have put a lot of people in great risk and jeopardy, but it really depends on who you're talking about. But for the most part, we're going to take care of our people. There are some people that really don't deserve to be taken care of, and we'll take care of them in a different way.
Okay, so that didn't sit well, actually, even with some Republicans. We'll put A3 on the screen. This is Mike Johnson's website still saying that you actually have to pay back pay to federal workers. Sam Stein picked up on that, although Mike Johnson is, of course, supportive of everything Trump says for the most part at this moment. John Kennedy of Louisiana is not. We could go ahead here and roll A4.
The president, it's not up to the president. I mean, his opinion matters, but Congress has got to appropriate the money. Read the Constitution.
Do you think it's legal for federal workers to?
We've always paid back pay to the military and federal workers, and Congress has already always appropriated the money, and we will this time, in my opinion.
So this comes down to a dispute over whether Russ Vought is or is not correctly interpreting what kind of powers he has during a shutdown. I'm going to read from NPR here, quote, "The shutdown does not give Vought or the White House any extra powers, according to Bridget Dooling, a law professor at The Ohio State University who worked at OMB for over decades. She argues it's a clear misunderstanding of the differences between temporary lapses in appropriations, which is what a shutdown is, versus permanently laying off workers. She says, quote, "This is a bluff." The White House, meanwhile, says Democrats have left them no choice but to look for savings across the federal government, but they've not explained why permanent layoffs would be necessary and not just temporary furloughs. So, Ryan, this is yet another debate about executive power and how the Trump administration is challenging norms. Not just norms, but also interpretations that have become norms as it relates to the power of the purse strings and the power of the executive branch. All that is to say, I think some of this is a bluff. I also think it goes into that bigger picture conversation about executive power they're forcing right now.
Right, and people say, well, it's federal law. Well, federal law is literally what Congress says is federal law. Mm-hmm. Congress writes the federal law. So theoretically, they could come in and say, you know what, we're not. There's minimum wages that you have to pay to people, but Kennedy is right. Congress appropriates money. If you appropriate it, then you have to give it to them. So the president can't just come in and say, well, I didn't like these workers, but I did like these workers. And federal workers are all over the country. There's this idea that they're really only here in Washington and Virginia and Maryland, but that's not at all the case. Mm-hmm. So,
it's like 80% of federal workers are outside the D.C. area.
Right, and so, and they all, like, Kennedy it's just wrong, like, because it's not their fault. Like, these are, I think Kennedy just gets it on a basic level. These are people who have jobs. They did their jobs. They were told they cannot come to work. They're now going to be asked to miss multiple paychecks, probably. Which, how many people out there watching this, can just miss 2 or 3 paychecks?
Yeah.
And without your entire thing coming crashing down, and you getting in the letters that you start getting, and start to have red lines under them and red, they're printed on red paper. So he gets that it's just untenable ethically to not pay them when it's no fault of their own. And also, as he has pointed out, every single time they have paid the workers in whatever deal they come up with. So I can't imagine a world in which Democrats do this whole thing because they're ready to fight, but then at the very end they cave on paying the workers. Like, Republicans would have to nuke the filibuster to like get around paying the workers, and they don't have the votes for that because Kennedy and others are not with them on it.
Unless, I mean, they would have to nuke the filibuster. I'm trying to think if there's another like legislative maneuver, if they could tag it into something.
No,
else,
and also it's not just Kennedy. Like, Susan Collins is not voting for that. Murkowski would not vote for that. So now you're down to 50 without, and some of these Utah guys done. Like, you don't have the votes to not pay the federal workers. Russ vote. So, pay.
So while we're on the topic of Republicans and their leverage or lack thereof to continue the shutdown going, let's roll this clip actually about FAA delays. It's a complicated question as to how FAA ends up with delays during or how air travel ends up with delays during a shutdown. We'll break it down, but let's roll this clip.
The air traffic control facility responsible for flights approaching and departing Nashville International Airport are set to close for 5 hours tonight because of short staffing. The Federal Aviation Administration says that flights will still be allowed to continue flying during the closure, but pilots are going to have to contact the Regional Air Traffic Control Center for permission to enter the airspace.
So the reason being given for the staff shortage, that's not immediately clear. Secretary of Transportation Sean Duffy, though, did say on Monday an increased number of controllers have been calling out sick since the start of the shutdown.
So if there's this idea that workers might not even get their back pay, we saw in a 2019 shutdown, and this is the New York Times noted that this morning, quote, controllers at important facilities began calling in sick at high rates, contributing to widespread flight delays and bringing a swift end to that shutdown. On Monday, Sean Duffy said he had seen a slight tick up in sick calls from controllers since the current shutdown began last week. Ryan, I don't know about you, I would expect that to go up when you start talking about potentially taking away the back pay.
Right, and as we said, they don't have the votes to not pay them, so it's just a bluff. But the bluff gets heard around the world, especially if you're a federal worker. You're following this news very closely. So then you're like, all right, well,
I'm sick.
If I'm not getting paid for this, then I'm not coming in.
Yeah, you're asking people to like risk just having volunteered as an air traffic controller in these conditions in which they're already completely understaffed. Now, to your point, I think they're going to get paid. I do think that it's a bluff, but I think it's a bluff in the context of this big picture reorganization that Russ Vought is architecting to consolidate powers he believes should be in the executive branch
All of them.
Many of them. And I actually don't think he's wrong about some of them. We've debated that before, but in this case, they are trying to they're trying to blame Democrats, get Democrats to be blamed. Like the Jon Stewart argument, they're trying to undercut for Democrats by saying, well, look at what you're doing to federal workers. We have no choice. That was the line from Mike Johnson. It's like, Russ has no choice. Democrats have left him with this choice. I don't know how well that's actually going to work when you are making the decisions in the executive branch for what's happening. It's not necessarily part of the government shutdown, so that you have to, everybody knows this hasn't happened before during government shutdown. So I think the politics of that argument aren't super easy.
Right, and the way that this should end is that, frankly, Republicans should just cave on the substance here. Because think about it. What do Democrats want? They want to save Republicans from a massively damaging political hit where 20 million people will see their health insurance premiums double in an election year. And Democrats are trying to save them from that. And who agrees with me? None other than Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Well, we'll get to that in 1 second. What did you make of the Jon Stewart argument?
Well, that is the argument. That's the thing, that they have no plan, they've got no vision, they got no message, but they have to try something like that. Like that's all that boils down to.
So how long, I mean, do you think Democrats, the politics of it, how long does it make sense for them to avoid coming to the table? I expect that eventually they will come to the table on the question of healthcare. And again, we went through the specifics
and
of that last week.
I think they'll have to like, give something on it.
Right. So probably non-citizen ACA enrollment or federal subsidies.
Yeah, and Democrats keep saying we are not providing health insurance to illegal immigrants.
Right.
So then just figure out a way to write that.
Well, I mean, they would have to come to the table on the federal hospital reimbursements, Medicaid reimbursements, and ACA enrollments for asylum seekers and probably all of that.
I mean, if Republicans keep trying to just undermine their own hospitals, like, so people who are undocumented come into hospitals.
Right.
So what would Republicans want done
They
to
still,
a hospital who is required to treat somebody?
Well, even the Republican plan includes reimbursements. It's just a lower level of reimbursements.
Which is, a lot of that is rural hospitals.
Yeah.
Oh, anyway.
But that's where I think that they probably will have to give
lower level. Why lower levels? Like, are the hospitals, like rural hospitals are too rich? Like, what are they trying to do?
I mean, I'm sure it has something to do with the influx of the last several years that federal reimbursements have skyrocketed for those hospitals.
Right, and and there's a point in the MTG post that actually goes directly to that.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show, ad-free, and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.